Koray, thanks for joining us. Good to
Pleasure
see
to
you. How are
see you. Yeah,
things?
very well, thanks, James. Good to see you.
Really delighted to have you for this week's episode of Three Questions With. Those who don't know Koray Camgöz is the CEO of the Taylor Bennett Foundation. I'm sure we'll get to talk a little bit about the brilliant work that you do. But let's go straight into it. So the first question is that dreaded first question of, so what do you actually do
Do you know what? This question is a lot easier to answer now for me
now?
than it would have been
Yeah.
earlier on in my career. Very simply,
Yeah.
as you've said, I'm the chief executive of the Taylor Bennett Foundation. We're an organization that helps people from diverse backgrounds enter and thrive in the communications industry. That's it. Much simpler now than to explain than it would have been in previous years. As a charity, we've been going for around 17 years in total, so we're really well established in the industry, and yeah, just enormously privileged really to be leading an organization that drives so much change in the industry.
Having worked for a long time at both PRCA and CIPR, you really do understand the kind of skills, challenges, and how you know how people's careers progress through this industry. So, did it feel like an obvious fit when you approached about this
It
role?
did, to be honest with you. As you said, I spent a lot of my career, a fair chunk of my career, working with professional associations and organizations that really champion the industry and champion best practice in the
Yeah,
industry. And I think it was at those organizations that I got to learn a lot about the industry that we work in, but also around the challenges that the industry faces, specifically with regards to inclusion and diversity. And I think that's kind of where my passion for the subject was really born. So that was,
yeah.
you know, I was very lucky to have that introduction, that experience. It's been, yeah, it feels like it's been a full circle moment, but it definitely feels as though I've landed in a role that fits well.
What do you see as the big challenges under your tenure that you want to help kind of move things
Yeah, I don't know.
forward on?
It's an interesting question because I'm not entirely sure the industry is that much better off in terms of its approach to inclusion than it would have been when the foundation was founded. Certainly not when you look at senior level recruitment. Things are pretty much as they were. So as a general point, 9 out of 10 communication professionals identify as white, and that has remained
Yeah,
relatively consistent. Certainly over my career, I've been in the industry for around 15 years. There's been some
yeah.
improvements, particularly at junior end of recruitment. As a whole, we're nowhere
Mm,
near where we need to be in terms of representing the organizations that we serve, particularly if you consider that the comms industry in the UK is largely based in London, where around half of the population are from an ethnic minority. So there's a lot of work to be done.
mm,
I think what has changed is certainly now more grassroots communities and more spaces that encourage people
yeah.
to be themselves. There's like brilliant work from the likes of people like us, the Asian Communications Network, there's Black Comms Network. There's all these fantastic organizations that have popped up providing support and
Yeah.
community. I think that is something we can take a lot of encouragement from.
It's interesting because from my perspective, I think it's very rare I have a conversation with a potential client where EDI doesn't come up as being a massive priority, and it's a different what you prioritize is different for every organization because every organization has different challenges around this. But from a recruitment perspective, I see that as a positive in that everyone wants to know how we're going to help them overcome some of those challenges in searches, and that's in senior search. Do you think that that's having an impact at all, though? Do you see any real shift in terms of actual hiring practice?
I think in some organizations that undoubtedly good work is taking place, and there are concerted efforts by leaders to walk the walk. So I think your point
Yeah.
around how, and I should have caveated, when I say very little has changed, I think we're in unanimous agreement that inclusion and diversity is more of a conversation than it was 15 years ago. Absolutely. I think the frustration that many of us have is that a lot of the time that hasn't translated into concrete action, particularly when we talk
A big
about
chunk.
building the kind of inclusive cultures and communities that allow talent from diverse backgrounds to thrive in the long term. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I'd say that there has been an improvement in that regard. And I'd say there are organizations doing really good work. In fact, we work with a lot of organizations who
Mm,
are really, really committed to doing the right thing and are doing that through investing in training programs or reverse mentoring or internship programs. And so there are organizations doing the right thing.
Well, thank you for that. We digressed slightly from 3 questions, but I think it's a conversation that is worthy of that. As you say, your career's taken a path that probably too few communicators take in terms of taking that step up to a CEO position. If you look back over the course of your career, is there a singular piece of advice you'd give the more junior version of yourself?
Yeah, I'd probably say stop worrying about trying to fit in and stop worrying about trying to assimilate and to fit into a mold of, predefined mold, which many people would perceive to be success. I'd probably say that would be the single piece of advice I wish I'd had earlier on in my career, particularly when I think back to those very early days. I was actually working for the CIPR at that time. And I remember really vividly the CIPR Excellence Awards that year. It was an Olympic year for those who are old enough to remember it. And it was a really star-studded,
Great.
incredible ceremony at the Hilton on Park Lane. On the one hand, it was amazing. But on the other hand, I felt very strongly as though there was this painful awkwardness and there was a sense that I didn't really belong. So I think that was
Right.
something which took a while to really overcome. I both of my parents came to the UK in the 60s. They emigrated here. They came from working class backgrounds. So when you're introduced to new environments and new situations, immediately there's a sense of I don't belong here. And so I'd probably, when looking back at what I wish I'd known earlier, it's just really a sense of really being comfortable with who you truly are and finding enormous power and value in not feeling the need to constantly try to fit in.
Was there a singular moment in time where you felt like, or not maybe a moment in time, but a point where you go, I feel like I belong now, or I feel like I've got over that sort of challenge?
For the first few years, I'd say no. And it was probably, I'd probably point to COVID, like that period during the pandemic when I was working at the PRCA. And obviously, as part of that role, I was really fortunate to be able to work with some amazing colleagues, but also some very highly respected industry leaders and to build relationship with those leaders and to realize that they are, they're normal people just like everyone else.
It was a pretty
Yeah, it
unifying
was. And I
moment,
think
wasn't it?
also like everyone was at home and it was almost this period where we were so active as well in terms of trying to take a leadership role on behalf of the industry and being visible, being present. And I didn't realize it at the time, but now I look back on it, I definitely feel as though that whole experience made me more confident. It made me feel more relaxed around other senior people and other industry leaders. And it also gave me the confidence to articulate the value in what I do. And so by the time we came out of that kind of fully remote environment, I felt as though I carried through a lot of those experiences.
We tell people all the time that people are just people, right? But I get nervous pitching to certain levels, and I'm sure everybody at different points goes, "Oh, I'm a little bit unsure whether I should be in this room." And I think you have to be able to kind of own that. And everyone has that moment in their career where something helps them to realize that they add value
absolutely.
too. Brilliant. Thank you for that. I think that's a really interesting piece of advice. And I think one of the things that's interesting about this is the themes that come out of this. And there's always that element of, if you can back yourself in that sense, then
100%.
I
Like,
think
because
you
when
will.
you do, then you're able to find environments and communities where you feel as though you belong. And that, I think, is, once you have that, you're able to really kick on. And I think that was what I was kind of referring to earlier about the spaces that are now available that aren't available, that weren't available previously. And all of those amazing organizations provide a sense of community for people, particularly those from diverse backgrounds. I was speaking at an event last week at BT, organized by one of those communities, Whataboutisms. And it was all about the integration of the communications agency model. And I mean, that room was a classic example of what I'm talking about. You had about 100 people in the room, but there's a sense of energy where people are themselves and it breeds support and it breeds a real community spirit, which really, really empowers people and encourages them to really fulfill their potential. So I think that is something which we can all be really proud of. And we have to be immensely grateful to the people and the individuals driving those communities.
Totally. Brilliant. Well, thank you very much. So I'll ask the final question, which is proving harder for lots of people to answer than maybe I thought. I thought everyone would say, I just want to be a footballer or whatever it might be. But if you weren't working in this world, what would you be doing?
Good question. And actually, it's almost like the next best thing to not making it as a footballer, because that was definitely my dream when I was younger. But I think I would be doing something around unlocking young people's potential through sport. I was really fortunate earlier on in my career to spend a year in New York. I worked for a comms agency for a short while I was there. But when I wasn't doing that, was part of something called South Bronx United, which was a football club / community program that worked with young people in the South Bronx. South Bronx, despite being 20 minutes on the subway from Manhattan, poorest and most deprived areas in the whole of the US. And the organization just did incredible work. So it was a combination of football coaching, mentoring, and education. And it was really aligned with the schools. So in order for the kids to be selected on the weekends for matches, they had to be hitting certain grades and commit to their studies. So I saw just how much potential was unlocked through those programs. Like some of those kids are now in the MLS playing football. So it was an amazing experience. I definitely feel as though I would be working in an environment that supports that potential.
And sports can be so transformative in so many ways. You know, I think about there's that working in teams, there's that community element to it, but it's also dealing with failure, because most of the time in sport we fail. I remember Roger Federer talking about the fact that I think he won 48% of the points in his entire career, or golfers or cricketers or whoever it is. There is this sense that most of the time you're failing. And learning to deal with that is so reflective of life, but it's giving people spaces that they can belong.
Absolutely. And I think it's sometimes it's deeper in that as well. It's like breeding a sense of hunger and ambition. So if you were working with a young person and looking for nuggets of potential, and that's what you want to see. You want to see that hunger and that willingness to win and to drive forward. And I think sport does that in a really healthy and in a sustainable way.
Well, it's the thing. It's a tragedy when anyone loses their spark or hunger to do something, right? And the worst thing would be to see that in a young person who feels that there is nothing out there for them.
Breeding that mentality inside them, because it's something that stays with you throughout life, throughout your career. And even in the instances where you are successful, the thing which sets you apart is knowing that there's always more that can be done. And I think that in itself applies in sport, it applies in business, and also just keeps you grounded as well, like not to get carried away with successes as they come, which I think is incredibly important. Gosh, we sound like such corny podcasters right now.
But it's true. You know, Scotty Scheffler, the world's best golfer, just before he wins the Open, says winning doesn't fulfill the deepest desires of my heart. He was saying it's part of what makes me who I am. And actually the win itself is fleeting, but it's the journey that allows me to live a life that is beyond anything I could possibly have imagined that makes it worthwhile.
And also being clear on what winning means. That's something I thought about a lot over the last year or so, defining the metrics for success. You know, early on in your career, you might attribute those to being financial or having a job title or all these things which you think are metrics of success.
Yeah.
I can't speak for everyone, but certainly in my case, I've come to appreciate that, you know, what drives me is impact, and it's the impact that our work has on the industry and principally on people's lives. So we're really, really fortunate to be working with people who've had their entire lives transformed by the fact that they were given a shot. They were given an opportunity through the Taylor Bennett Foundation. Like we've got alumni now. We've got 1,200 alumni in the industry, right across the industry. You know, the senior director of communications at Netflix, all the way through to an account executive for an agency. So it's a footprint which spans the industry, and it's all come about because people have been given that one opportunity. And that, for me, is what drives me. It's what keeps me focused and on scaling the work and on making sure that this foundation's in the best possible shape to succeed for years to come.
Yeah. And I think that is a fantastic point to end on. So Thank you very much. I really appreciate your time. It was, you may say corny, but I thought it was a really brilliant conversation. So
Likewise, yeah, it
thank
was
you
a
for that.
pleasure.
Really
Thanks for having me
appreciate
on.
it.